I came home early on a Thursday and found Lydia Voss in my bed with my husband, Owen Keller. While the dishwasher kept humming like the house had decided nothing important was happening, her ankle boots were still by the front door when I walked in, and by the time I pushed open the bedroom door, the room had already arranged the truth for me. Owen turned too late, one hand still at his waistband, Lydia pulling my sheet to her chest without any real panic in her face. And something in me went cold instead of loud. I did not scream, did not ask a single question, did not give either of them the kind of scene people build excuses around later when they need the story softened. I turned, walked back down the hallway, picked up my bag from the chair by the living room window, and checked for my phone, keys, and wallet like I was leaving for dinner. Behind me, Owen came after me fast, breath-catching, saying, "Wait. Willa, please. It is not what you think." And I kept moving because the shoes by the door had already answered that. By the time I reached the porch, he was barefoot and panicking, trying to pull the whole thing back into language before it hardened into consequence, saying I messed up. Just listen. Do not do this. Like this. I looked at him then. Really looked. And what I saw was not remorse first, but fear. The fear of a man realizing he had lost control of the version. He tried one more time. Softer now. Like volume might make the lie gentler. Saying, "Do not make this bigger than it is." And that was the moment I understood he was already negotiating. I nodded once. Not because I agreed with him, but because I had heard enough to know exactly what kind of night this was going to become. Then I got into my car, closed the door, and watched him standing there under the porch light with one hand lifted, still acting like he might stop me by asking. I drove away without looking back, and by the first red light I was no longer thinking about what I had walked in on, only about what had already been set in motion. Dung. Toida vit quarso tus over ilco. De la loi curto. Dur die la bairn chirn light. During 342. I checked into a small hotel downtown with white bedding, dim hallway lights, and the kind of front desk smile that never asked questions it did not need answered. I took the key, rode the elevator up, and entered a room that smelled faintly of bleach and machine-made air, then set my bag down without turning on a lamp. My phone began vibrating before I even sat. Owen filling the screen with, "I am sorry. Please answer. This is not what you think." And then the simpler line. I messed up. I read every message once and answered none of them, because the sequence was already familiar. Denial, first. Apology, second. Then the quiet request for time before consequence could settle. When I sat on the edge of the bed, I was not replaying Lydia in my sheets or Owen on the porch. I was replaying the beige boots by the door. Lydia had not looked shocked when I opened the bedroom door, and that detail stayed with me longer than anything Owen said, because panic can be improvised, but comfort usually arrives earlier. I took off my coat, placed my phone face down, and lay back without closing my eyes, letting the room stay quiet enough for the useful questions to rise. The co-op had been mine before the marriage. The monthly charges had once come directly from my account, and only recently had Owen kept urging me to simplify everything. Lydia had also been in and out of our place too often, arriving with overnight bags, offering little favors, and once pushing hard for a keypad change because women needed better security. That was the first moment the night stopped feeling random and started taking shape, because kindness and access had been sitting too close together for longer than I wanted. I picked up my phone again, scrolled past Owen's name, and opened the contact I had saved after an arts fundraiser. Dana Whitlock. Matrimonial attorney. Still untouched until then. I typed one clean sentence. Dana. This is Willia Prescott. I need an urgent consultation tomorrow morning. Sent it, and felt the room sharpen around me. Dana Whitlock's office sat above a quiet block in Manhattan. All glass doors. neutral walls, and the kind of order that made panic feel childish the second I stepped inside. She greeted me without softness, shook my hand once, and motioned me into a chair, saying, "Start at the beginning. Keep it factual, and leave the feelings outside for now." So I gave her the bedroom door, Lydia Voss in my bed, Owen Keller following me onto the porch, and the hotel message where sorry arrived only after denial failed. Dana wrote nothing during that first minute, then asked when I bought the co-op, whose name held title, and which account had carried the monthly charges for most years there. I told her it was mine before the marriage, mine on paper now, and only lately had Owen pushed to route more expenses through the joint account for convenience instead. She looked up then and said in New York title matters, tracing matters, and the spouse who leaves in shock can surrender more than a room if the paperwork stays. Then she gave me the part they were likely counting on, that I would blow up, stay gone, and let Owen keep possession long enough to reframe everything for court. If he expected tears, angry texts, or some midnight negotiation about betrayal, she said, he was counting on exactly the behavior that would make me easier to move later legally. I felt the trap in that immediately. Because Lydia's comfort in my room, Owen's do not make this bigger, and the joint account pressure all pointed the same direction at once. Dana leaned forward and gave me the plan in language. File first. Lock down passwords. Save statements. Speak through counsel. And do not lend him a single word now. By then I was not thinking about the bed anymore. Only about sequence. Because once she named the law, the whole affair stopped looking private and started looking structured instead. When I left her office, less than 12 hours after opening that bedroom door, I was carrying no comfort at all. Only timing, paperwork, and the first advantage back. Back in the hotel, I opened every account Dana had flagged, expecting sloppiness maybe, but not the steady pattern that appears only when someone thinks nobody is counting carefully tonight. There were studio rentals in Queens, small rideshare charges at hours Owen had called work, and payment notes vague enough to hide inside, otherwise ordinary-looking transactions there easily. I screenshotted each one, built a folder, and kept moving, because random cheating leaves messes. But repeated charges with matching timing create something much colder than impulse ever could alone. The monthly co-op charges had also shifted, and once I saw them landing more often through our joint account, Owen's recent talk about simplifying bills stopped sounding merely domestic anymore. Lydia had pushed for the keypad change months earlier, smiling in my kitchen and calling it smart for a woman living in Brooklyn, which now sounded less helpful than strategic. When I checked the access log, her entries lined up too neatly with my late sessions at the studio and Owen's supposed overnight load-ins for lighting work all spring long. I drove back to the co-op after watching Owen's car leave, let myself in, and walked straight past the kitchen island where he had loved to talk about future upgrades. In a drawer beside the utility folders, I found a packet labeled renovation ideas, full of appliance printouts, contractor estimates, and handwritten notes about value before refinancing this place later. I photographed every page, especially the one that paired open kitchen, updated lighting, and equity options in Owen's handwriting, because that was no longer fantasy talk between spouses at home. When Dana reviewed the folder, the statements, and the access log, she did not call it dramatic or personal. She called it coordinated pressure on title and possession inside marriage. She told me they did not need to take the co-op outright. They only needed me panicked enough to blur records, abandon possession, and negotiate on weaker terms than necessary. The sentence landed because it fit everything I already had. Lydia calm in my bed, Owen warning me not to make it bigger, and the bills rerouted quietly together up. I texted one question to Reed Keller, Lydia's separated husband and Owen's older brother, asking whether she was still receiving support from him while staying with us there that month. He took longer than usual to answer, then sent back only, Why are you asking that? And the delay itself told me enough to save immediately for Dana before speaking. By the time I closed my laptop, the affair had changed shape completely, because what I had found was not just sex or betrayal, but a plan already underway quietly. By the next afternoon, Patricia Keller had left 2 voicemails and 1 text asking me to come to her apartment so we could clear up what she called a misunderstanding. She wrote that Lydia was there too, that everyone was upset, and that families did not handle things through lawyers when one bad night could still be explained. I listened once, stared at the words, "Lydia is here," and understood exactly how quickly they had moved from concealment to protection without changing their tone at all. I did not call back, because Patricia was not offering truth. She was offering a room where language could be rearranged until betrayal sounded smaller and access sounded innocent. Dana confirmed that the filing would trigger automatic restraints, which meant Owen could not start shifting funds, rewriting beneficiaries, or creating fresh chaos once service was underway. That mattered because his messages had already changed from, "I am sorry," to "Please do not do this." And panic always shows itself fastest when money stops moving freely. Owen came to the studio entrance before sunset, shoulders tight, eyes tired. Speaking low like restraint might make him sound reasonable, and opened with, "This is getting out of hand." I told him no. What got out of hand was Lydia in my bed, the keypad access, the statements, and the renovation folder sitting in my kitchen drawer. He pushed back with, "It was a mistake." I ended it. "You are blowing up our life." And I answered, "You did not end anything. Owen, you just got caught while it was still running." That stopped him for a second, not because he understood me, but because he finally heard the shape of his own defense from outside himself. He tried again, softer, saying, "Rebecca is gone. My mother wants to talk. We can still fix this." And every word landed against evidence already saved elsewhere. I left him standing there with Dana's instruction fixed in my head. Not one extra word, not one loose explanation, because they kept calling it a misunderstanding and I had already started calling it by its real name. By that night, I turned off read receipts, routed every message into a folder, and let the Keller family speak into silence they could no longer soften. Patricia wanted a table. Owen wanted time. Lydia wanted shelter. But none of them wanted the thing sitting underneath all 3, which was accountability. I slept with my phone face down beside me. And for the first time since opening that bedroom door, I knew distance was not avoidance anymore. It was structure. Owen was served on Monday morning outside a midtown venue before load-in. And by the time Dana called, the papers were already in his hands. She kept her voice level and told me the filing was active. The restraints were in place, and anything he had hoped to move quietly now had a legal fence around it. I pictured him reading page after page with that same porch-light panic under his skin. Only now there was no wife in front of him to negotiate down. Dana moved immediately into discovery, asking for joint statements, payment histories, keypad logs, and every record tied to Lydia's access, travel, or disguised reimbursements. I sent everything I had saved, then pulled more, including rides, rentals, and the vague Venmo labels that looked harmless only if nobody bothered lining them up. Once the timeline was stacked in order, the shape of it stopped pretending to be an affair and started reading like coordinated concealment, with money attached. That afternoon, Reed Keller called instead of texting, his voice flatter than before, and told me Lydia had been asking him for support while telling him she was staying with a female friend in Brooklyn. I did not fill the silence for him, and he finally added that she had used the same excuse when charges from Long Island City started appearing during their separation. Dana told me to write that down exactly as I heard it, because parallel lies matter when someone is building 2 stories for 2 different audiences at once. The storage bill surfaced next. Tucked inside the same pattern of small transactions, Owen must have thought would dissolve into ordinary marital noise if spread widely enough. Dana subpoenaed the records, and what came back tied the unit to boxes of kitchenware, lamps, linens, and other pieces Owen had once described as borrowed gear for work. Hearing that list read aloud did something sharper than the bedroom door had done, because they had not just been sleeping together. They had been staging a life. Owen's messages changed after that. Less pleading, more jagged, asking what Reed had told me, why Dana was requesting so much, and whether I was really trying to ruin everything. I never answered, because ruin was not what I was building. I was simply refusing to keep disorder blurred enough for him to survive inside it. By the end of that week, every record that had once looked small on its own was sitting where it belonged, and the price of assuming I would lose control was starting to come due. The hearing lasted less than 40 minutes, but by the time I sat down beside Dana Whitlock, the room already felt smaller than the version Owen Keller had imagined. His lawyer tried to soften everything into marital strain. One lapse. One overreaction. One couple who should not be dismantling a life over a private mistake. Dana never followed him there, keeping her voice flat as she walked the court through title, account history, keypad access, and the renovation notes found inside my kitchen drawer. When Owen's attorney leaned on reconciliation, Dana answered with records, and the judge cut in before the performance could settle, saying this court handles property and protections, not regret. I was asked a few direct questions, and I answered them the same way I had answered every useful question since that night, with dates, documents, and no wasted emotion. Across the aisle, Owen kept reaching for language that sounded human enough to win back softness, but every sentence he offered ran headfirst into something already printed. Reed Keller appeared only long enough to confirm that Lydia Voss had been telling different stories about where she stayed and who was supporting her during the separation. Patricia Keller was seated behind them, stiff and silent now, and for the first time since her voicemails began, she had nothing procedural to offer that room. By the time interim protections were granted and the co-op remained secured to me, the silence around Owen looked different from the one he had expected. He caught up to me outside the courtroom doors before the elevator arrived, voice frayed now, asking if this was really what I wanted after everything we had built. I looked at him and heard the same instinct that had followed me onto the porch. Not truth, not accountability, just one more attempt to rename consequence before it landed fully. So I told him the only thing he had really lost that morning was the right to have this story told in words that protected him, then stepped into the elevator and let the doors close. When I walked back into the co-op weeks later, nothing looked transformed, which was exactly how I knew the transformation was mine and not something borrowed from noise or spectacle. I changed the keypad code, rerouted the last automatic payments, folded new sheets onto the bed Lydia had touched, and put every room back under the kind of order that answers only to me. Owen moved out. Lydia disappeared. Patricia stopped calling, and the silence they left behind did not feel empty. It felt earned, like a space no longer working overtime to absorb somebody else's damage. The divorce closed the way it had moved from the start, on paper, on record, without one final confession big enough to compete with what the documents already proved. I made coffee in my kitchen, stood where Owen once leaned talking about our future, and understood that healing had never asked me to become softer, only more accurate. I did not win because he fell apart, or because Lydia lost her place. I won because I finally stopped standing between other people and the consequences they built for themselves. Thank you for staying with me through this story, and if any part of it felt familiar, I hope it reminded you that peace can still be chosen. If you want more stories like this, grounded, healing, and honest, share this with someone who needs it and subscribe.